how do you create space in your life for something big if you're already overwhelmed?
We are not helping ourselves by celebrating our exhaustion. We have created this culture where the more you're rushing, the more you can talk about how overwhelmed and overworked and overfunctioning and how much you've gotten done. If you're listening to this and you feel like you are meant for something bigger, then you got to create some space in your life for that bigger thing. Hi, I'm Sarah Schmidt. I'm 52 years old, and I can honestly say that I have never felt better. For the first 50 years of my life, I navigated some pretty fucking hard things that I like to call my Holy Schmidt moments. They include things like being diagnosed with cancer, navigating my sexuality, adopting children, two divorces, losing my dad, and having a biological child in my 40s. After decades of some really, really hard work, I have fallen deeply in love with myself and my life. Turns out that embracing the magic and the expansion that comes with getting older, it isn't a bad place to start. I'm here to prove that life doesn't have to decline with age. In fact, it gets a whole lot better. On Holy Schmidt, we are going to dive into my curiosities around wellness and longevity and mindset, and we are going to do it with really vulnerable, thoughtful conversations with people that I really love and admire. This season, we are going to celebrate and honor growth and transformation and find profound beauty in connection. Welcome to the show. Welcome back to Holy Schmidt. I am so excited to introduce you to our guest today. She is a person who truly walks the talk. And once you've finished watching this episode, you're going to understand what I mean by that. Dr. Amy Shah is a double board certified doctor and nutritionist who over the last few decades has built a phenomenal practice and a wealth of work, women's health, nutrition, longevity. She could speak on a multitude of topics with ease and expert advice. Today, we are going to talk about health and wellness. One of the things I love most about her is the way she can break things down into bite-size, manageable, digestible pieces. She is good at helping people take action to improve their health, improve their wellness, and ultimately live long, healthy lives. I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I have, and I look forward to the conversation that we can have together about how to take care of ourselves so that we can care best for others. Enjoy. Dr. Amy Shah, welcome to Holy Schmidt.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited to have this conversation. I've been watching and listening to a lot of the stuff you've been putting out on social media. And I have to just tell you that I'm super inspired. I'm inspired by your content. I'm also inspired by the way you deliver it. And I just want to, there's something about the way you are so direct and clear that's also very, very receivable. You know, you do it in such an approachable way. And I can feel the passion behind what you are talking about and inviting people to consider. And I just wanted to start the podcast off this morning with a question of, how did you find this calling? What brought you to this place, knowing this is how you wanted to spend your time?
That's such a great question. I mean, the internet didn't exist when I was a kid and trying to figure out what wanted to do. And so that's a great question because it really didn't. I thought that I had all these ideas about health and nutrition, women's health, gut health, and I would write them down. And then one day I would write a book about it because that was the only thing I knew from my perspective growing up that you could do with creative ideas, as at least from a physician standpoint. And, I thought I would write a book and then I could talk about it one day. And I really dreamed about that a lot. And so I think I always knew I wanted to do that. But this crazy thing called the internet came out and really changed the game for me. And in fact, I don't know if we're going to go all the way back there, but my parents brought me to America. Like when I was born, they decided they wanted to come to America because they wanted more opportunities for me to be able to share what I wanted to share, influence the world in the way I would want to. Because, as a girl, you don't always have that option in many places around the world. So when we came here, I was 5. They had already planned that I would go to English school because kids start school at 2.5 in India and Asian countries. So when I came here and when I was growing up, it was always understood. I always understood that the reason why they did all this and gave up everything they had and moved across the country and had to start over is because they wanted me to have an opportunity to share something that could help others. Mm-hmm. And I think that was where it came from originally. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, it developed over time in terms of what I wanted to do.
Yeah. It's so beautiful. I saw this post that you did back in October where you talked a little bit about this story of coming here and, highlighted just some of the challenges with some beautiful photos of you as a little person and graduating from medical school. And I so resonate with that sense of purpose, of calling. And I just really want to express some gratitude for the fact that you really followed it. Because I think you're doing such a beautiful thing for people and women in particular, in giving them actionable, thoughtful advice with a true medical perspective. There's a lot of advice out there.
Yeah. Yes. There's a lot of advice out there. Yeah. And I think I think I've talked to you about it offline a little bit, but it wasn't easy. And it wasn't till very recently, probably towards the end of the pandemic, that I actually really leaned into it, because for a long time there, I kind of knew that I had this thing that I wanted to do, but wasn't sure how to do it.
What helped you get over that hump? What helped you actually do it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it all started for me with just putting myself out there and saying, okay, if I want to write a book one day, I should probably start taking notes or writing something down. And I heard a podcast that day when I was going to work. It was the Ritual podcast, and I had read his book, so I was listening to his podcast. And he had a friend of his on who had a wellness website called Mind Body Green. And they said that they took wellness blog posts from anyone, and it was not paid. It was a guest submission. And I thought to myself, wow, that would be so cool. I should just try that, That day I got to work and I put together a post and I sent it to them. And about 2 days later, I got a message back that it was accepted. And I thought that to me was the first sign, if you want to say from the universe, or for me, okay, so maybe there is this path, and maybe I start writing blog posts and maybe I save them. And even though this is not paid, I'm going to save all these posts and eventually it will become something someday. And so that's when I really got started. It wasn't until at the end of the pandemic when a couple of people invited me on podcasts like this one. And they said to me, what are you doing with this thing? What is your goal with all of this? And I think it was 2 separate people who basically were you need to do this. This is it. And sometimes, even though you could have confidence in yourself, having people that have already been there, that have already done it, to say to you that they see something in you, just gave me a little more push to put myself out there. I think for a long time, I was dipping my toes in. I was working full time in my practice, which I realize now, I'm how did I even do that? Working full time, having the kids at home.
2 kids. Yes.
Yeah. And trying to do this thing that was really a big undertaking. It was easy to just be okay, well, whenever I get time, I'll work on this thing, this dream that I have. But it was not until then that I was okay, I actually need to go for it. And then as soon as I really went for it, I jumped in the pool instead of dipping my toes in, that's when things started to change. Because I think when you actually put your mind to something, you're putting all your energy towards something you really love, it just shows and it grows.
That's a beautiful, I love that. I jumped in, instead of putting my toes in the water. I think either one can work, but you really, you recognize the passion, the desire, and you moved in that direction. And I just think it's a beautiful thing because for so many of us, and particularly women, we hesitate so much when there's something I want that's really maybe just for me.
And you know what I also think is what really helped me get over the hump now that I'm thinking about it, the thing that really helped me get over the hump is that, listen, by improving my own nutrition, my own gut health, I started to be able to think better and clearer and make better decisions and really find my own gifts. And I thought to myself, well, yeah, I think biologically that makes sense. And I want other people to be able to find their gifts and live out their gifts. Because once you fix your nutrition, you fix your gut health, all of a sudden your brain feels clearer. And so that to me, I shifted the focus off of me into like what I could help others with, then it became easier because it wasn't about me anymore. Like you said, I felt weird talking about me, but I felt really great giving someone a secret or a help to find their own gifts.
I love that so much. I mean, even just yesterday, my electrician was at the house and he's like, God, you look great. How are you doing? I mean, I've known this guy for like 13 or 14 years. He's just been, whenever I have any issues, he's there.
Yeah.
Mike's the guy. And he's like, I said, yeah, I've really been taking great care of myself. And he goes, yeah, I can tell, and then he started talking about some of the health challenges he was dealing with. And I was like, oh yeah, I can totally relate to that. Hashimoto's, I have a thyroid issue. I'm like, have you tried this? Have you, and I recognize like I speak from a different place of not just authority, but genuine like desire to make your life better. Like I discovered this thing, I do this or I don't do that. And it has transformed how I feel and therefore what I can do. And I just, I want to talk about it. I want to like, share the good news.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it shouldn't be like hidden somewhere.
Yeah.
And then I also thought like, I love to ask lawyers for their advice on any legal issue that I'm having, right? It's like the same thing with doctors. Like, I think people want to know like, okay, I hear so much, like, what's your take on this? And I think that's what I try to bring.
What's really beautiful, Amy, about that is, for many of us who see doctors, on a regular basis or get the checkup, rarely is that conversation about the actual, what should I be doing every day? And very rarely do we get a glimpse into how our caregivers are caring for themselves. And so you are offering such a beautiful combination here of a little bit of insight in how you actually walk the talk. And as I thought about that, and as I was thinking about this conversation, I really wanted to hear a little bit from you on how you got to that place where you were able to just really embody and walk that talk with such courage, with such passion, but also with such grace. Because I know, because I've also done it myself, it's not easy.
Yeah. So, I came from a place where I was feeling exhausted, burned out. I felt like my hormones were out of whack. My gut health was poor. My energy was poor. My mood was poor. My sleep was poor. And I asked all my colleagues and like the people that I thought were maybe I was missing something. And they all were like, you're fine. You're a mom. You have young kids. You have a full-time job, a practice, all this stuff. And I just knew that couldn't be right. Like I was really feeling awful, even though on the outside it looked like everything was going great. And so I came from a place where I think I teach for my former self. Like I teach from that place of, hey, I've been there too. I remember that feeling. You feel exhausted, but you're tired and wired, like you can't sleep. You feel overwhelmed all the time. You're trying to multitask. And the biggest things I think women do is they take from themselves to give to others. And so there's really nobody telling you like you are allowed to sleep. You are allowed to eat well. You are allowed to improve your gut health. You are allowed to get sunlight. You're allowed to take a walk. Like I truly thought that taking a walk in sunlight was like a luxury. Like if you were done with everything you needed to do for the day, like who has time for a walk in nature? Like that was my thought. And also like the sleeping thing, I think, we all know now, but I think about 10, 15 years ago, basically if you slept 8 hours, that was like so lazy. Like you really
Like
weren't,
gluttony. Yeah.
yeah, like you really weren't going for it. Like that's
Yeah.
like so awful.
Yeah.
And then, I had this mom guilt because I was working and I had these kids. And so I really struggled. And I came from a place where I was like, I got to do something. Like, this is not going to work for me. And I need to make a change. And so that's what I started to do. And I think as I started to figure out what was working and what wasn't, I felt like I could say that to others. Now I realize that we all kind of go through that journey. So many of us, almost everyone. And so what are the things that actually make the biggest difference scientifically? And from my experience, there's like a few things that I talk about so that, you could do a million things and now we have Chat GPT and we have AI, like we have all the answers, but we need someone to be like, hey, if you're going to start with 5 things, start with this, then you can add on as you need. And so that's where it started for me. It's from my own dark place of struggle, really.
Yeah. Wow. I so resonate with that, Amy. I mean, when I made some major shifts for myself, I remember feeling so selfish. I mean, I was I was 80 pounds heavier than I am today. I was pre-diabetic. I had high cholesterol. My thyroid was a mess. That was the thyroid I didn't have a lot of influence over because it was from cancer treatment and it wasn't like a Hashimoto's thyroid situation, but I wasn't doing anything to help the situation. And I started making these simple changes. And I remember feeling so selfish because I was making time to go exercise every single day. And I got I got like, they were like guilt trips everywhere. And then I started not eating some of the things that I had previously indulged in. And I felt like I was inconveniencing everyone around me because I wasn't eating bread and pasta all the time. I was choosing fresh vegetables and fruits and lean proteins. And I was making sure I got to bed at a reasonable hour. I wasn't staying up late. I wasn't going out to dinner late. I stopped drinking alcohol, all these things. And I felt like I was inconveniencing everyone around me. And I was like, I wasn't any fun anymore, the life of the party, like everyone was like, well, where could Sarah even eat? It was so interesting. And I was feeling better and better and better. And yet there was this other set of messages that were coming at me that were like, this is really too much. And it's interesting because I've now been in this pattern for like 15 plus years. And I mean, everybody who knows me knows all of this about me, but it is amazing how I still get it. It's sort of like a resentment of like, particularly I see it from family at times, like, oh God, we didn't get you almond milk.
Yeah.
Like,
exactly.
And it's just it's kind of an interesting reality that I think in particular women are confronted with when we start to choose ourselves. And it's not like I'm choosing, yes, I do get my nails done and I love a good facial and all those things, but I'm talking about choosing like basics, like sleep, nutritious food, it's interesting how we penalize people for, making good choices for themselves and not doing some of the things that are just so culturally accepted and expected.
I remember when my son was first born and I had my mom come, and I remember feeling guilty about it because so many of my friends had kids and they just handled it on their own between the two of them, the husband and wife, and I remember saying to my mom, I was like, I am good with everything. I can do everything. All I need from you is to watch the baby for 1 hour so I can put my coat on, go outside and just take like a brisk walk and just get away from it all for like 45 minutes. And then I'll come back and I'll be like a new person. And I literally, it was like super cold. I wore my winter coat. This was in New York. We had this tiny apartment. And I literally would just like walk outside and just like feel alive for like a quick walk / jog. And then I would come back and I'm like, just that alone. And I was telling my husband, I said, that is a reason I needed help. Is not like I was feeling so guilty, but I was like, if I come back, I'm just a better person, a better mom. I feel healthier. And then, and that was like my first inkling that I needed to like incorporate more of this stuff in my life. But you're right. Like I felt really guilty. Like I kept thinking to myself, like, does everybody go through this? Like, does everybody just need an hour away, to exercise or walk or just get outside? And like you said, later on when they got to be a school age, I remember going to a school event and having a conversation with a mom. And she goes, you're like my husband, he's selfish about his needs too. Wow. And he, makes sure he works out and he makes sure he and basically implying that if you took care of your needs, if you slept and you worked out, that you were selfish. And so I remember going home and thinking like, wow, that is such a weird, I never thought about it that way. I thought about it in a way of like, I'm a better mom when I do that. And so, there's messages, very, very crazy messages out there.
I think it is so pervasive. It's gotten to the point now where if I am crabby, my kids will say, Mom, did you work out today? Because they know that and I work out I do something every day. It's rare that I don't, but they know that that is a key to my mental health and my, like I'm pretty even keel if I get that time, and they really support it. But I mean, this is real stuff. You mentioned like the 5 things, and I really want to touch on those because I think for a lot of women in particular, people who are trying to work on their health or getting to this place where they realize the way they're living isn't sustainable. The question of like where to start is really a tough one because there's so much information out there and it can be so overwhelming. And very few of us have time for, the 75-step wellness routine. What are the things? What are your, Amy, I know what my non-negotiables are.
Yeah.
What are yours? And what do you advise the people that you're seeing and working with?
Well, I think when it comes to nutrition, I give women a very easy framework, which is the 30-33. 30 grams of protein in the morning, 30 grams of fiber throughout the day, and 3 servings of probiotic foods. And the reason I do that is that if you get that first part even right, the 30 grams of protein, the first part of the day, it doesn't have to be 6 a.m. in the morning, but somewhere in the first meal of the day, that is going to set your hormones up. That's going to set your metabolism up. That's going to set your brain up and your gut up for a great day. And as you move through perimenopause for women 35 and up, this becomes even more crucial. And so for me, it's like, if I didn't have a chance to eat breakfast right when I woke up, I'll do it later in the day, but I will get that 30 grams of protein. So that's the first step. The second step is the 30 grams of fiber. So most people don't realize that 95% of the US population does not get the recommended fiber requirements. And it's actually not super easy to do it. And so you pretty much have to eat fruits and vegetables if you want to get fiber, because your Starbucks Frappuccino and your drive-through does not have fiber. It's fiberless food, which fiber is food for your gut bacteria. So your gut bacteria is essentially starving, 95% of us, and it creates so many of your neurotransmitters, so many of your feel-good hormones. It communicates with your brain all the time. And so I feel like that is something that no matter what diet you're on, you can, well, I guess there's like some diets that don't allow fiber at all, but very, very few. And then the 3 servings of probiotic foods is probably the bonus, like the third step, because I think it's really hard to do number 1. It's really hard to do number 2. But once you do number 1 and number 2, and you're like, all right, I want to go for extra credit, getting 3 servings of probiotic foods is not that hard. Like, you could take a spoonful of sauerkraut. You could do a probiotic cottage cheese. You can have yogurt. You can have coconut kefir. You can have, now when we go to Whole Foods or these healthy grocery stores, there's entire sections of probiotic foods. And so kind of incorporating some of that into your life is great. And then for exercise, I have a mnemonic also. It's a 4-3-2-1 mnemonic. And that's what I live by because of the science. And so that's what I share. So it's like 4 days of walking / some kind of heart-based activity. So it could be swimming, dancing, whatever. 4 days, because we know that if you walk for 40 minutes 3 times a week, you can actually grow an area of your brain called the hippocampus. And as you get older, you really want to grow that part. And most people think you can't grow your brain. You can actually grow your brain even as an adult by doing something like a walk 40 minutes 3 times a week. And I say 4 because I feel like if you can't get a 40-minute walk, you can get a 30-minute walk 4 times a week. So 4 is walking. The 3 is weight-bearing activity. So as we get older for women, this is inevitable that we will lose muscle mass, we will lose bone mass unless we are actively doing weight training. So it doesn't have to be in the gym with weights. It can be any sort, a push-pull, weighted wet vest is something that I often recommend to people who don't have joint issues and they can't really lift weights. And then the 2 is heat therapy, which is like hot yoga or hot sauna, or because of longevity data, the data on growth hormone boost, the data on brain health is just insane because we have so much research now about the benefits of hot therapy. And then we have 1, which is a quick sprint once a week. That seems to be something that most people have not added to their life. Most people do not sprint after adulthood, like after leaving college, or even after leaving high school. But that is something that can actually really help your heart and change the way you feel. So I usually say that the 30-33 and the 4-3-2-1 can be a nice basis for people who are looking for like a quick thing like, hey, what do you do? Based on the research, based on your clinical work, what you've learned, what is it that you recommend for people?
I love the mnemonics. I think they're so helpful, and you break it down in a way that, can help people take a bite out of it.
Yes, exactly. That's something like, and then you can build on that in a way that feels right to you.
Right. And I think as you're just getting started, when I was just getting started, I had the whole just do one thing, and I don't want to even overwhelm people with the mnemonics. Like even just doing one of the things that you are talking about, like I notice, I'm a savory person. My breakfast is always savory. I mean, I had 3 10-gram venison sticks for breakfast today with a green muffin, literally the greenest thing you've ever seen, like green as grass, full of all kinds of yummy stuff that I baked up last night. I did a big batch of them, and I'll have 3 a day now. It's a way for me to get all my greens in when I'm in my office all day. Sometimes I just don't want to eat like 6 cups of lettuce, but I actually had 6 cups of lettuce in these muffins. Crazy.
Wow. That's really cool.
But I feel like, there's a little bit of wisdom in each one of these things. If you just do one, and when we do one, we're more inclined to do another.
I think going out for a walk, like literally what I used to do when my son was born, like that story that I told you, like I just wanted my mom to watch him for 1 hour, so that I could 45 minutes I could spend outside and just like unwind. I mean, that alone could change your life.
It could change your life. Yeah. I mean, and now we have so much research about what it's like to get exposure to natural daylight, right?
Yes,
there's so much about how we reset our circadian rhythms. And,
yes,
for anybody who really wants to dig deep on these topics, I'm someone who I really hear the wisdom in each one of the things that you are advocating, Amy, and they're all so incredibly thoughtful. And I really, really appreciate that. I also appreciate how, what you're doing is almost breaking kind of an ancestral way of living, and I see it in my own life. If I look back to my mom and my grandmother and my great grandmother, I consider health very differently. Mm-hmm. And the way I'm caring for myself is very different. And it's not easy to make those changes and those shifts or be the person that's doing the shifting.
And I think, we have to understand, and this is where circadian rhythms comes in. Our genes are stable, have been stable for thousands of years. We have little epigenetic changes through the generations, but really we have to live by the sun and dark cycle. We have to get nature. We have to be social creatures. We have to eat things with fiber. Like, these are basic things that I think no one has considered in the modern world. And that's why everyone is getting sick and tired and depressed and anxious, because if you just take out all these basic needs that we have to function optimally, we're going to have a literally like a pandemic of mental health disease, of metabolic disease, of cancer, everything.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we do. And so I think going back to simple thing, like getting synced with your circadian rhythms, like actually the way I got my handle Fasting MD is on Instagram. Now, by the way, I can't change it back. I have tried with Meta so many times to change it back. So I'm stuck. So what happened is I learned the science of circadian rhythms, and I was using it for myself when I was trying to reset my gut, reset my nutrition. And I was talking to people about it. And I said, what I've been doing is getting more sunlight in the morning and more darkness at night. And I've stopped eating late at night and right when I wake up in the morning out of bed. And I've been doing this thing where I'm getting a lot more nature time and all this stuff. And everyone's like, wait a second, what did you say about this fasting thing? Because we want to know more about this. And so I think people understand intuitively, like, yeah, you should be sleeping more. Yeah, you should be getting more light. But they were really interested in wait, what is this thing with circadian rhythms and intermittent fasting? And that was when intermittent fasting was really big in the media. And so I said, well, it's like most people are doing it wrong and not really matching their circadian rhythms. And so that became my topic that I was talking a lot about, especially for women, because women were like, wait, I'm trying this fasting thing and it's not working for me. And I'm like, yeah, because you're not aligned with your circadian rhythms. You're not aligned with your infradian rhythms. And that's why it's not working for you. So that was when I really went down that path.
I talk about how I eat with the sun.
Yes.
And so I've been doing that for a really long time. I tend to eat my first meal kind of later in the morning. I just am not hungry when I wake up, and I like to exercise fasted. And then I tend to eat a savory lunch, early lunch.
Yeah.
But
same.
I rarely eat after sunset, and I rarely eat. I try to leave a 2 to 3 hour gap between when I finish my last meal and when I go to bed.
That's exactly right.
I do that pretty much year round. So, in the summer, sunsets at 10 o'clock. I'm not eating until 10 p.m. I rarely eat after 6 p.m. most days of the year. I find that my sleep is deeper when I'm not digesting. And I have all this kind of evidence to back that up on my Oura Ring and my 8 Sleep mattress and all the things that I do to track my REM and my deep sleep. And, I challenge anyone on that, and I don't drink alcohol anymore, and because alcohol was really messing up my sleep too. And by the way, it also made my knees hurt, all the sugar. So it was,
I have a question
really hard
for
to go to
you.
the gym the next morning.
I have a lot of people like you in the wellness world who are really into gadgets, and what's your favorite one to track all that? Like, I know you have Oura, you have 8 Sleep.
I used to wear my Oura Ring religiously, and and then I had my, my Apple Watch, which was, tracking a workout and all this kind of stuff. And the funny thing is that my Apple Watch, my kids joke, the only reason I need to wear an Apple Watch is to find my phone. Okay. Because I can ping my phone, really. If you looked at my Apple Watch data for the last, I am not shitting you, 7 years, there's probably a variability of 0.2%. I get the same amount of steps. I exercise. I do this. I have the same amount of standing hours, the same amount of active calories, whether they're accurate or not. The thing that I find the most helpful right now is my 8 Sleep mattress. So my 8 Sleep gives me all the data that my Oura Ring did. I just stopped wearing the Oura Ring because I always took it off when I was lifting because I was scratching the heck out of it.
And I hate wearing something on my fingers.
I don't. I don't.
I never wear my rings.
I lift very heavy. And when I have something on my hands, it hurts. I already have calluses. I mean, people would be like, ew, but I mean, I love my calluses. I'm really proud of them. So I stopped wearing the Aura ring and I just use the 8 sleep data and, it'll tell me, it'll give me a good read on how my sleep was the night before. Now, I am so consistent that it's rare that much throws me off. Like the last couple nights I've had a little person and climb in bed with me in the middle of the night, which which threw things off a bit, but I think the more consistent I am, the less data I actually need. The data that I'm reading most is how I feel.
I used to have the Whoop band. Have you tried
Oh
that?
yeah. I've never tried a Whoop band. No, and I've
Okay.
always been intrigued by it, but I'm like, I have to wear the Apple Watch because I got to find my phone.
That's exactly what happened to me. I was doing a fitness plan where the trainer wanted me to sync my Apple Watch to the app. And I said, well, I have a Whoop band. And he said, nope, you can't do that. Like you have to have an Apple Watch so I can see, your steps, your activity. Like he was helping me track that. And, yeah, so that was, what I did. But I agree with you. It's really intuitive. Like I would wake up in the morning and I would try to guess my, how my sleep was based on and like you said, when you check in with yourself and you're consistent, it's almost always what you thought. The only times it was messed up for me was when I would drink. And that's when I knew, like you, that I'm like, okay, that's it. I don't really get a lot out of it. And, especially if I was like just going out for a dinner or something, I'm like, what was the point of messing up my sleep for that? So that's why that really did help. I think these things kind of give you some insight.
They do. Yeah. I mean, alcohol was not a hard thing for me to give up. And I always say that because I think for some people it is much more difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, I never really enjoyed drinking. I don't know if I've actually been drunk. Even as a college student, even in high school, I wasn't drawn to it. I didn't love how it made me feel. I definitely enjoyed like a drink or a glass of wine or two, but I would recognize it after a little bit, like 2 glasses of wine, I would get crabby, and I would wake up the next morning and as somebody, I mean, who's 50, honestly, my joints hurt now when I eat sugar. I don't eat any sugar actually. And so alcohol is sugar. I think it's also poison. I don't want to put it in my body. I was diagnosed with cancer when I was 20. I'd like to live a really long time. I understand the fragility of life and I just don't see actually there's no benefit for me. I mean, it doesn't make me happier. It doesn't make me more social. I see no value in it. And so logically, I'm like, why would I do that? I mean, and I get it that that's hard for some people to hear, but
Yeah.
I have a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of people that count on me. And when I'm not taking care of myself, I really have a hard time managing all of that. So I make it a priority.
Yeah, no, I think the data, when it started to show, even that one drink a night was going to be bad for your brain, like a regular one wine a night kind of routine, I said to myself, well, this is something that I don't really feel drawn to. And I could easily kind of make it so just less prominent in my life. And you know what? The more I made it less prominent in my life, the more I realized I didn't need it. And I think most people realize this. So when you stop drinking regularly, then all of a sudden, and I would say, okay, I'm only going to drink on special occasions. And then I would get to that special occasion and I'd be like holding my drink and I'm like, I'm good though. I don't actually need this drink. Like what was it? Like I can save myself by not drinking tonight and feeling good tomorrow. And so it ended up being like, I never kind of thought that I would stop drinking, but I felt like it made it easier and easier. And then now it's like, I can't tell you, I think I have to like count on my fingers the amount of times I've drank in probably 2024.
I actually haven't had a drink in quite a few years. And yeah, it's funny. I was cleaning out my basement about 3 months ago, and I had like 6 cases of wine from our honeymoon trip to Italy. untouched. And I had always thought I was going to build a wine room, and they were just sitting in the basement in their cases. And my contractor was over that day, and I said, "Hey, I don't really want to give you alcohol because I don't think anybody should drink it, but this is really good wine." And I'm wondering, he's like, "Oh my God, my in-laws would love this. They love wine." I'm like, "Take it." And he carried, I think it was actually like 8. He carried like 8 cases of wine that I had shipped in from like Tuscany out of the house that day. And I mean, I just kind of laughed. I kind of chuckled at myself, like, you know, yeah, good riddance. Now I just have more space. I was able to reorganize a whole part of a closet. It was great. I don't miss it at all.
We have this bar in our home, like a little bar area that was built into the home when we bought it. And I remember getting, like kind of stocking that area.
Yeah, to make it look
like
nice.
It's literally untouched. Yeah, it's like now that we have teenage kids, I was thinking to myself, like, okay, we got to get rid of all that stuff because one, we don't really want to encourage that with, the underage kids and having it like on the counter like that.
Yeah.
And two, it's like, if we haven't drank it in like 10 years, we probably are not going to drink it in the next 10 years. So
probably not.
Probably time to get rid of that.
My liquor cabinet, you're going to laugh. For my birthday, it's empty. Okay. I got rid of all of it because I wasn't drinking it for the same reason. I'm like, why do I have this? And it's in such a prominent place. I don't need the kids to I don't even need to have this around. So I got rid of it all. So it was empty. For my birthday last year, my 7-year-old, he brought down all his favorite Legos.
Aww.
Without me knowing. And then when I woke up the next morning, he had them all arranged in the cabinet.
So
and he
cute.
had he created this whole little vignette of all of his favorite Legos in the liquor cabinet. I was like, that is the most beautiful use of that cabinet. And it still is. That's where all of his Legos are in the liquor cabinet.
I love that.
So, but you segue into a really great topic that I wanted to talk about, which is parenting. And I see you with your kids on Instagram, and they clearly are so proud of what you do and invested in it. Let's talk a little bit about raising kids who have an awareness of health and how you're doing that, and how you help people to make this not just about ourselves, but all the people we care deeply about.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's changed a little bit. I think before, when they were little, we buy all the food for them, right? So it was very easy to just say, this is how we eat, can get all the groceries. We had only certain types of snacks and all that stuff. When they entered the teen years, it became a whole different world. They want to have the Starbucks. They want to have the Taco Bell, which is great.
The vending machines at school.
Yeah. And for me, the biggest thing for me at this age is to show, not tell. And I think that's because you know how it goes with teens. We were all teens once. And I think the more you tell them something, the less they want to do it. But when you show them, it becomes almost like, I remember going to college, and this is like every teen, right? You're like, everything your parents say is like ridiculous. And then one day, you are sitting by yourself and you're like, you know what? I actually really like that food, or I want to do things the way I did it when I was growing up. Or, they're like, you kind of come to this realization, that you kind of want to do the things that you were maybe like forced to do or shown to do. And so what I know for a fact is that the more we demonstrate, like I demonstrate to them what I do to keep my mental health in check, to keep my gut health in check. Because I want them to have those tools when they want those tools. And we talk about this all the time. We talk about how eating a really good, healthy meal and getting good night's sleep and getting some sunlight, like automatically resets almost anything that you're going through in life. And like kind of talk to them about this, because I don't think most people know that. I don't think most people know that, like, if you're kind of feeling anxious or sad, maybe have a good night's sleep, maybe eat a good meal, and maybe get some nature time and get some sun and see what you feel after that. And I think that was one of the biggest gifts I could give to my kids is really showing them like, hey, your gut health is linked to your mental health. Hey, the reason why you want to eat these things is so you don't get sick. Remember when you got sick and you hated it? And just kind of making them aware of these things so that they can make their own choices. I can't take that memory out of my mind of my friend who when I was growing up, she would come to my house to eat the snacks because her parents were so restrictive and watch her every move when she was at home, and they would like slap her on the wrist, figuratively. And so she would come to my house and she would want all the snacks, and all she thought about was like, hey, when are we going to get the next snack or drink? And I was like, oh my God, like it's literally backfired on her parents. And like, she even talked about how it kind of, as we got older, I remember her saying like it really messed up her relationship with food because she felt like it was like the secret thing that she had to do to actually access these types of foods. And so, and how addictive these processed foods are. And so it's like, it's almost like you're hiding something from your family because they've told you that it's bad. And then there's this horrible relationship you have with food growing up. And so I really wanted to make sure that I didn't kind of create that for them.
Yeah. You're talking so much about the importance of leading by example, right?
Yeah.
And the whole do as I say, not as I do.
Right.
And, we know that's just doesn't work in parenting.
Yeah.
And yet, it requires us to make some hard choices for ourselves at times.
I mean, my kids always roast me about how I prioritize sleep. They're like, she's going to be asleep, and I'm like, okay, good. Because I keep saying to my son's 17 now, and he'll say to me, I sleep more than all my friends because like I need it. And I'm like, amazing, because that is something that I hope like that he's just picked up over the years, that like when he gets a good night's sleep, he feels better the next day. And with teens, like none of them are sleeping enough. So the fact that he recognizes that feels like a win to me.
I love it when my kids make fun of me in front of their friends for like
Yes.
my green muffins or
Yes.
When they were little, I used to put spinach in the blender with the pancake mix. And so they didn't know until they were much older and like went out to like a restaurant that pancakes aren't green. And then they were like, wait, these aren't pancakes. And then when they realized those were pancakes and what I was doing was really different, they make fun of me for these things. You're like, oh yeah, mom has to go to the gym, mom has to like, and I love that. I love when they make fun of me for those things because I know they're seeing it. But, Amy, one of the things that's been really hard for me, I have 4 kids, 31, 19, 16, and 8. And my 19-year-old is, he's African-American. He has sickle cell disease and he has FSGS, which is a degenerative kidney disease. So his kidneys are failing. He has 2 genes that are causing these 2 separate diseases. And he's also like a normal 19-year-old. And we noticed this during his senior year of high school. He went from really being like, this is a kid who, when he was little, he used to grab a cucumber out of the refrigerator and just eat it. And we used to joke that he was so healthy because he would eat like 4 cartons of organic raspberries every day. And he would make his own breakfast in the morning, and it would be carrots, cucumbers, like Italian salami, and some like aged Manchego cheese. And,
amazing.
And that would be his breakfast, and he would make it himself.
That's amazing.
And then all of a sudden he got a driver's license and he discovered, the world of, we had eaten fast food. Come on, we're real. We've eaten, but it wasn't a staple, and we don't eat out a lot. And it was never his choice, but he got on the fast food wagon and he couldn't stop, and I literally remember cleaning out his car one time as a surprise. He was sick and I got his car cleaned, and there were like French fries under the seat, like he couldn't stop. And the vending machines at school and the energy drinks and now he's off at college and there's a robot on his campus. So I remember when I went to college, you could order late night cookies and they would it would deliver you a box of warm cookies and a pint of ice cream. Yeah, I gained 20 pounds on that and Lucky Charms in the cafeteria. But they have robots on campus, and you can get late night bites. And the robots they're literally they're little they look like wagons with covers on wheels with flags, and they're independently on the sidewalks delivering buffalo chicken bites and French fries, and it's the late night bites. Last week I was in Boston, helping him transition from a 7-day hospital stay for a sickle cell crisis back to the dorm. And, this is real shit. This isn't just like, and I tell you the story, and I talk about this because I want people to hear that, like, this isn't just like, oh, it would be good for you to help your kids eat healthy and you should model this for them. I mean, we are truly dealing with like this epidemic of early onset everything. And it is our food. It is our food that is ultimately poisoning and killing us.
I mean, we hear this with teenagers all the time, especially with chronic diseases, diabetes, or like, like you said, chronic kidney, whatever. It's like, it's almost like that girl that, I grew up with, like, it's almost like you want that thing, and these things are so addictive. You want that thing that you're not supposed to have. And when you have it, you get a burst of dopamine. It's like an explosion. And it just makes you want it even more. Yeah. And so we're battling against something like somebody was saying, like, you give a child a choice between an orange juice, and an orange soda, and they're just innocent, but they know what makes them feel good. And they know what they want again, because that dopamine pathway is super strong. And so we're fighting against that. And I remember my son saying, Mom, do not bring those Trader Joe's chili roll chips. Do you know they're like the Taki knockoffs?
Yeah, like the Taki version.
Yeah, and they have like a cult following. Mm-hmm. And he said, I feel that way when I have those. And I'm like, yeah, like that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like, he's like, if they're in the house, I just keep thinking, like, when can I have them again? Like, when, you know what I mean? And that's what your son is dealing with. Like, it's not that he wants to eat all these things. It's like your brain is telling you need to go seek that out, because it created such an amazing experience in your brain.
Right. I think it's so important that people understand the dynamic. I mean, it happens when we scroll.
Yeah. Oh my
gosh.
Our
phones too. I mean, we as a culture are like we become like a dopamine seeking amoeba, right? Just looking for the next hit. And the less we're aware of that cycle in ourselves, the harder it is to break a lot of these patterns that are really destroying. I mean, 2 hours of scrolling before you go to bed is going to really fuck with your sleep.
It is. And I think, one of the biggest things I did, I went on a trip to Costa Rica. It was my first retreat I've ever done. And in the hotel room, I don't know why, because in American rooms, there would always be a plug, like right next to the bed. But it just so happened that all the plugs were taken, and I had to plug my phone in, like in the bathroom that was like in the room, but kind of like, out of reach, obviously. So it just reminded me that week got the best sleep of my life. I literally would stand in the bathroom until I was done with the phone, and then I would put it away on the charger, and then I would like do my nighttime routine. By the time I got into bed, it didn't take me very long to fall asleep. And for someone who's had lifelong issues with, sleep disturbance, especially around my period, I was like, what is this? Like, this is so worth it, And so I started to do that at home. But of course, we all get derailed. So I went on a trip, and ever since I got back, my phone was back in my room next to my bed. And I was like, God, it's like that. It's like this dopamine thing that we want, that dopamine hit. And it's so hard. It's almost like, unless you're consciously breaking out of that, matrix, you will go back to those old ways. I do sky before screens though. I think that's something that will change people's lives. Like that sky before screens just means I look at the front of my phone because all my notifications that are for my kids or anything that's important will show up on the front of my phone. And then I put it down. So if there's no emergencies, because, as a mom, as a doctor, there are emergencies that happen.
1,000% agree
and
with that.
You don't want to sleep through. And my kids, and my husband, my kids, I have a couple other people that their rings will break through the do not disturb. But so I take a look. So 99.9% of the time, I'm good to go. And then I get up and I brush my teeth. I go to the bathroom. And usually what I do is after I wash my face and change, I actually walk outside and just get some sunlight into my eyes. And that can be as easy as like while I'm brushing my teeth or while I put my skincare on or while I'm, stretching and literally walk out the back door just for a couple of minutes. And then I will go and pick up my phone. And I think what that does is that instead of starting the day groggy and kind of like being in like a super cortisol frenzy and looking at the demands of the world right away, I give myself a chance to reset, maybe journal a little bit, maybe think about what I want, have some intentions, and then dive into the phone.
Nice. Yeah. What do you do during the winter months when the sun doesn't rise for, a while? Like we're even dealing with that here. I mean, I get up at 5:30 and we don't really see the sun till almost 7 now.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the hard part. So for people who live in places where the winter's long and dark, there is something on Amazon called Happy Lights. There's like many different brands. You want to put that on your bathroom counter or somewhere where you can see it in the morning, or even next to where you're sitting. These have been actually clinically proven to help with a mood boost. Seasonal affective disorder, and also just like generally improving energy and focus and mood. What I like to do is often what I'll do in the winter, I don't live in the East Coast anymore, or like I grew up where it was super cold. And so often it would be like later in the day where you could actually get outside. But where I live now, by 7:30, I would go and do my workout at that point. So like maybe wait till a little bit later to go outside and do my walk. Whereas in the summer, I'm out super early.
Yeah. Yeah. I find this even getting up and going outside in the yard with the dogs in the morning, even when it's dark, just the fresh air. It's cold air now because I'm in Chicago, so it's quite chilly. It's cold air. It hits my face. Sometimes I can still see the stars in the morning, but that's okay. I'll just like have a moment with the stars, they're still there, or I look for the moon and where it still is in the sky. Just a sense of my connection to the universe, it helps phenomenally.
I think the biggest thing I've learned over the last few years that I keep sharing when I do these talks is like big things don't come to overwhelmed, rushed people. And I think for so many years, I just believe that if we're not multitasking, if we're not rushing through the morning, that you're just being unproductive. But I felt like the slower my morning, the more time I have before I get into the frenzy of the day, the better things were going for me. And so I realized, okay, so slow mornings are like my favorite thing ever. When I can have a slow morning, and I purposely create slow mornings by saying like, okay, when do I have to be somewhere? And then work backwards. So people are like, oh, I have to get up super early. If you can work backwards, and I know not everyone has this luxury, I completely understand that. But like when I can, now that I control my time a little bit, I will try to have the big meetings a little bit later in the morning, like 9, 10, because I want to have that slow morning. And I crave that clarity that comes with it.
Amy, this is so beautiful. And I want to restate it because I think it's so important. Like we have created this culture where the more you're rushing, and kind of the more you can talk about how overwhelmed and overworked and overfunctioning and how much you've gotten done. And this is a thing with like mom culture too. Like oh my God, you won't believe, and da da da, and I'm doing this and I've got that and da da da. And the more we are not helping ourselves by celebrating our exhaustion with one another. We are not doing ourselves any favor by competing who can do the most and not collapse.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, big things don't come to those who are rushing all the time. And I love that you said that. I mean, rest is okay. Slowing down is a good thing. Taking your
Yes.
time, giving yourself some space. I mean, if you feel like if you're listening to this and you feel like you are meant for something bigger, then you got to create some space in your life for that bigger
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. I think that's like the biggest concept is like, how do you create space in your life for something big if you're already overwhelmed?
This is so beautiful. I
Yeah,
feel
I
like
love
so
that.
much of what we're talking about is really, really actionable. And yet there's a part of me here that realizes that the conversation, even that we're having, is such a privilege. There is a
Yes.
big divide right
Yeah.
now in our world. And in some ways, I feel like living in the Midwest. I mean, I'm in a bit of a bubble here where I am in Chicago, where wellness is really taken quite seriously, not to kind of the extremes of like LA or maybe Scottsdale where you are, or even parts of New York. But there is a big chunk of our country that this isn't resonating. And we have an epidemic of like major proportions when it comes to like obesity and metabolic disease and cancer and early onset Alzheimer's and all of these things. And I'm wondering about just how you're thinking about this big divide. Because when I go home to so my family where I grew up, it's 185 miles north of where I am right now. When I go home, it sometimes feels like I am in a completely different country. And it's, I struggle with it. I struggle with how I see people caring for themselves and the health crisis that exists.
I completely agree. I still work in the clinic 2 days a week. And when I go there, it's just a great grounding reminder to me that not the whole world is not like the world that I see on my wellness pages and the people who are reaching out to me and asking for nutrition.
Yeah.
Like, this is the real world.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm like, okay, like, let's bring it back here and really think about what is it that we could be actually saying to real people. That's a whole
Yeah.
different message
Yeah.
than the people who do have the privilege of having a slow morning, eating fresh foods and getting fiber, getting probiotic foods. Like, there's a lot of people who are just on step one, um, and or maybe they have a schedule that doesn't allow for any of this, or financial status that doesn't allow for any of this. And so I'm faced with that on a regular basis, and I think it really helps me stay grounded.
What does your heart kind of tell you about what are some of the answers for this? Where does the solution lie? I don't know. What are your thoughts on it? We acknowledge the divide is there. What do we think we should do about it?
Again, I think that we need to make it more of a priority. In like, I don't think that, like, when I talk to my patients that are not in the wellness world, for example, often they don't even know things like what is fiber, what foods have fiber, what foods have protein, these are things that we could be teaching people in like elementary school, maybe, and we could be giving them healthy tools, things that they could incorporate into. It's not expensive to maybe get protein in the morning and maybe cut down some of those fast foods and say, oh, my gut bacteria needs fiber. And I think we've gotten to the point where even my patients, I have to say, over the last 10 years, it's changed completely. There are most people, because of mainstream media, everyone's on TikTok, most people actually now ask me, questions that I think are quite advanced. And these are people that, we would say are part of the divide, yet it's reaching the masses. So I think this is a time to really take advantage of that and start teaching the young people, start giving them tools like, hey, this is how you can optimize your mind, your health, your physical being, your mental being, and then go from there. And what I feel like what I do is really empower the moms and the caretakers, because I feel like when you want to make change in the world, you empower the moms. Like that's when
I love that.
change happens.
Yeah.
They make the decisions for their children.
Yeah.
They make the decisions for their for everybody in their household, including themselves. And they're the change makers. They're the movers and shakers.
Yeah. Never underestimate a group of moms taking a walk.
Oh, yes, 100%. That's when the big ideas happen.
Amy, I just got chills. I have loved this conversation. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much. And I feel just like I got to know you a little bit more from what I've been seeing on Instagram. And I think you are an extraordinary human. And I'm really grateful that you are doing what you're doing in the world.
Thank you. You too. I really appreciate you, and I enjoyed talking to you about this.
Yeah, I can't wait for this episode to come out. So
yes,
if people want to learn more about all the things you do and how they can really just maximize your incredible wisdom, tell us about where to find you and all of your different offerings.
So I'm on social media. Instagram, I'm at FastingMD. And then my website, which is probably the good hub for where everything's at, is Amy MD Wellness. So AMYMD as in doctor, medical doctor, wellness.com.
Awesome. I also just want to make a note in case people are listening and aren't, because the option will be also to watch this on YouTube. But if you're listening, Amy has been walking on a treadmill this entire conversation, getting her steps in and keeping her body moving. And, one could argue like, oh, look at her go. But honestly, it's the simplest thing that, you can do. And I've already asked you for the recommendation.
I'll send you the Amazon links, and you can share it with your audience, because it's not my thing, or I'm not getting any kickbacks or anything.
Yeah,
so
it's okay. We'll put a link. Sure. We'll put a link in the show notes, but there's so many things you can do. I want to just encourage everybody who listened today, just choose one thing. Choose one thing. Yeah. And Oh, Amy, thanks again.
Thank you.
Really appreciate
Thanks so much
this.
for having me.